This is the Forbes Books Podcast, conversations with amazing humans who are impacting the world of business and beyond. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this week I'm sitting down with small business marketing expert Nicole Zeno. Nicole's journey from witnessing her family's small business to establishing Clever Cow Media and Clever You has made her an inspiration to entrepreneurs everywhere. With a belief that collaboration fuels prosperity, Nicole's going to share her insights on goal setting, future strategies, and why businesses fail and succeed. Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And so I have this running joke on the podcast that I feel like serial entrepreneurs are psychopaths because entrepreneurship is hard enough as it is, but then to do it over and over again, you should be all committed for even to attempt that. But before we get into your serial entrepreneurship, I want to talk about small businesses. Recently, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and first time in my life owned a home where I was like, I couldn't call a super to fix something. It was something I was responsible for. And it was really the first time that I experienced working with small businesses. I mean, obviously, if you live in the New York metropolitan area, you're sort of dealing with small businesses, but mostly on the retail side of things. I've always been one of these people that I want to support small businesses. I want to, if I had my choice, if the price is the same from a small business to a large business, I prefer the small business. But when I came down here, I was always sympathetic to the needs of small business and seeing, as you know, the stats of, and I'm sure depending on where you pull it from, 90% of businesses fail, 85% of businesses fail within their first 2 years. And I never knew why that was until I started working with small businesses, because I came to realize that the reason a lot of small businesses fail is because they're bad at small business. So let's start there with the idea of small businesses surviving and thriving in this economy where you have big box stores, you have giant corporations who have, who get tax breaks from the government. They have a leg up on the small guy. Why do you think small businesses fail?
Oh, it's such a good question. And I think you just, gave us a really good overview of that, right? So I think that most small businesses, people who own and start small businesses, they're people who see an issue or a problem and they say, I could solve that, right? Or they're looking for a little bit of freedom in their lives, or there's just a lot of reasons that people start small businesses. And most of them don't start it because they're good at business. Once they are set up, they have the foundations, they're ready to succeed. In any other situation with someone who understands business, they'd be able to succeed, right? But then they start hitting the challenges of growth and scale and process and hiring and all these things. There's so many different things that you have to know in order to be a small business. And we are expected in our society to just know these things. But really, these are skills that we have to practice and we have to learn, right? I always like to talk about the athletes who talk about how they had no lives growing up and they missed their prom and they practice and they practice and they practice, or musicians. And as society, we like to praise those people. But in business, we expect them to just know how to be a leader, to just know how to do processes and scale a business and all these things, even though you started your business to make koozies on Etsy, right? Or to mow lawns in your neighborhood, right? And so really, I think you're exactly right. Small businesses fail because the numbers are stacked against them. They don't know how to do everything, but they have to do everything. And then they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, and they have to make the most out of it. And nowadays with social media and the internet and YouTube, there's so many different ways to gain all this knowledge that it's overload. And what do we trust and what do we don't? And how do we go next? And what are the next steps? And I think that's the main piece here.
Well, you know what drives me crazy too, a lot of small businesses? It's and you kind of alluded to it, it's the simple things like calling someone back, showing up on time. It's all these little things that people don't think about as being important. Like for me, as someone who would employ a small business, that's such a big part of it. A person could do a crappy job, but if they're receptive to messages and callbacks, I'm willing to give that person a chance than the other guy who just is too busy with all other clients. So I feel like it's those little things that sometimes gets in the way of successful small businesses. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's even as little as storytelling. So often, I work with a client and their biggest issue is that their story, they're trying to be authentic, but it's not feeling authentic, right? Or their product is confused or their offerings are confused. So their story is confused on their website and they're trying to sell to too many people. And then all of a sudden, no one knows who who or what they do, and or even as simple as goal setting. Right. I'm what they consider a marketer. I don't consider myself necessarily a marketer, but we fall into a lot of those services. And one of the major things with marketing is they try to like hide what their major goals are for marketing, thinking like we don't need to know that. But there are a million ways to do marketing. And so especially with small businesses who have, a low amount of resources, a low amount of budget, they don't have an open checkbook, right? They don't have open time. Knowing what the goal is and picking your activities and your, where you're putting your time and effort into to match those goals. I mean, there's nothing better. And yet those are the small things that are always missed, right? They're just always missed.
Let's talk about the marketing piece. Even though you're not a marketer, Nicole, you're not one, but we're going to talk about it for a second, because this is a big thing for small businesses as well, because I think sometimes entrepreneurs might be under the impression that, okay, I've built my business, now I need marketing, and then marketing will be the thing that makes or breaks the company. And I think that's where sometimes it's like playing poker. They put all their chips in like, okay, we've got this company, I'm going to spend all this money on marketing. So how do you thread that needle of how companies can incorporate marketing into their companies, especially while they're trying to grow? Like you were talking about those growing pains of growing.
Yeah, you completely hit the nail on the head there. I've been on a soapbox lately, kind of like preaching this idea that one of the main reasons that I personally think that small businesses don't grow is because they're always in reaction mode, right? We need sales yesterday. We needed marketing yesterday. We needed all these things tomorrow. And especially with marketing, things take time. You can't build an app, in the tech spot. You can't build your app in 3 weeks. It's just not going to happen no matter what engineer tells you that they can, right? There's still testing, there's market fit, there's lots of things that have to happen, right? And so with marketing, generally, I see that companies come to us when they're in reaction mode. They needed it yesterday. And they should have came to us 6 months ago and really started like planning together. What is the goals in the next six months? What does the success look like in a year or 3 years? And then build your marketing plan around that. And when a big trend comes up, maybe not so much jump on it if it doesn't fit what the goals are. So often I'm telling my clients, like, does that fit our goal? Like, should we be putting resources to it? No? Okay, let's maybe bring it back up in 6 months or a year when we're doing our planning. And for me, it's about bringing my clients into a proactive mode. I've worked in Fortune 100 and 500 marketing. I've worked with startups. I was a startup founder. I am a small business owner, work with small businesses. So I've seen it at all levels. And what happens in corporate a lot of times and in bigger places is that they are proactively planning and giving their team time to kind of work through what an actual plan would be. And then they see results. But if you're not planning, then how are you going to see results? If you're not giving your team time to build, how are you going to see results? And so we're really here at Clever Cow, we're really trying to figure out that puzzle piece of how do we bring small businesses from reactive mode into proactive mode so they know when they put money, time, or effort into a marketing campaign or a growth plan, they're actually going to see results. And how do they check it to know, okay, we need to pivot, or we aren't seeing the results, we want to see why, and really bringing them into that space that other businesses in bigger scalability situations are already in.
And Nicole, that ties in perfectly with how we kind of opened this discussion about small business owners are specialists in their field. They're visionary in terms of creating something or starting something, but they don't know about being proactive when it comes to marketing. Unless you decide to go get your MBA or go to get a business administration kind of degree, there really is no way to learn that until you do it. So how do you connect these companies that are being reactive? I don't want to say like saving their bacon, but how are you able to sort of fix what they didn't do by not being proactive? What kind of steps do you take?
It's going to change depending on which client we're talking about, right? Every client is a little bit different, but the first thing I always ask is, what does success look like in a year? What does it look like in 3 years? And we have different exercises to pull people through to really get what that looks like. We do some discovery, whether that's audits on their website, their messaging, all of those pieces. We learn from them what they're currently doing, what their biggest pain points are. I know that everyone says pain points, but really figuring out like where are they least efficient. And this is a really interesting space because it's different from everything else. Small businesses don't have an executive team who are looking out for them and doing different jobs and being very specialized. They have generally the CEO who's doing 10 different jobs, maybe one other person with them or a team of 10. And, you know, they are all kind of in every space. So what are they doing? How can we make them more efficient? And then how can we use the money and the budget they have and the resources they have to really stretch to the longest and the most efficient amount of getting the best of everything, right? I'll put it this way for you, Joe. Ready? If you're building a house, you're not going to go to Home Depot and start buying all the wood and the nails and start hammering things together. You're going to build blueprints first. And then you're going to start building the house and buying all of the equipment, right? Same thing here. Small business owners generally are jumping in and building the house without the blueprints. We're coming in and saying, okay, when you're done with our products, here are the blueprints. Now, whether you take that and you build a team internally, you go and find freelancers, you go with another marketing agency, or you hire us and our expertise and our ecosystem of partners, you have blueprints. And that's going to be the main way to get you proactive. And it does take a CEO who's open-minded enough to say, okay, we're in a spot where we're thriving, but that's not always going to be the case. Let's plan for the future instead of waiting till the future comes.
And how do you know that marketing works? Because marketing, like advertising, you're laughing already. Marketing and like advertising, and because this is probably the questions you get, so I'm asking it for the people who may be calling you after this. Because the one thing a lot of folks do is like once they invest X amount of dollars, you know, we're recording this podcast at the end of 23, so people are probably forecasting for Q2, Q3, Q4 right now. They'll be like, okay, what is spending X amount of dollars in Q2, Q3 going to translate into? So my question to you is when you get asked this question of, okay, Nicole, here's my 1-year plan of success. Here's my 3-year plan of success. How do you know what that success is? Is it as simple as the sales? Is it outreach? Like what kind of metrics do you use to measure the success of a marketing campaign?
Yeah. And you said so many things that are like just punches in the side here for me, right? And this is the reason I don't consider myself a marketer is because the marketing industry, especially, you know, kind of leaves small businesses behind and always with the best intentions, right? I have plenty of marketing friends who have agencies who don't work with small businesses and I love them to death and they're doing great work. But at the end of the day, I come from a entrepreneurial family. My parents were small business owners. I saw what effect one small business can have on not just our family, but the families of their employees, our community, right? It has a lot of impact and we're losing that impact. So for me, I saw how the marketing industry works, which is people go into it trying to build something that's going to help small businesses and startups, right? And then they realize they don't have a budget, they're hard to work with, and that the agency model, the traditional agency model just doesn't work because they have to keep hiring more experts in, which means their payroll's higher, and that means that they have to charge more. And small businesses can't afford it. And a lot of them come to us and say, well, marketing doesn't work for us. We worked with an agency. We can't afford $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 a month. And it just didn't work for us. We weren't seeing the ROI. So what I really did, I saw this trend happening in our own company and we took a step back and decided to pivot. I mean, Joe, I'm telling you, like we fired clients that were big money clients just so we can pivot and say, let's come back to what our mission and our values are. Like, how do we finally figure out what the puzzle piece is for small businesses, right? And that is the piece of figuring out exactly what that goal is. So if your goal is more revenue, right? And it's not always the case. Maybe it's users, maybe it's freedom for the CEO to like, you know, actually be able to take a vacation and not have to worry that the business is falling apart. And I know that resonates with a lot of people because it resonated with me, right? Whatever that goal is, now we have to take a step back and say, okay, how do we measure that? So more revenue, what does more revenue mean? To Spotify, more revenue is billions of dollars, but to a small business, that could be $5,000 more a quarter. It could be $1,000 more a month. It could be $10,000 more a month, right? Because they want to hire another employee. So we really find what that number is. So not just what is success, now we take it back and say, how do we measure success, whatever that number is? And sometimes we even kind of pull back a little further. So if your goal is revenue, but we're really talking about just the marketing team, you may have other pieces that fit into revenue. So, but that the marketing team, every time they talk to someone, 9 times out of 10, they make a sale. Well, then we just want to talk to more people, right? And so we bring that number back to talking to more people because we know that'll bring it back to revenue, right? So we want to make sure that these are actionable numbers that people can actually record, that they can actually look at and say, we have tangible numbers that are working. And marketers tend to shy away from numbers because then they're accountable for those actions. And to be fair to marketers, and this has happened to me, CEOs think that marketing is going to save everything. But let's remember, marketing is just bringing more people to your product. You still have to sell them. You still have to have customer service. You still have to call them back, like you said, right? You still have to write those emails. And so there's thinking about how does marketing fit into your business holistically and how do you build those plans? And that's why planning is so important, right? Because if we come back to that major point, and I know I'm rambling on a little bit here, but this is such an important point, is that if we come back and we say, okay, marketing fits into a business holistically, it only works if we have the processes, if we have the efficiencies, if we have the team around it to happen. That's where we come in. We look at that whole piece because small businesses don't have that set up already.
Awesome. Thank you very much for explaining. I know I kind of took you on a little
I know. I'm sorry. I'm a New Yorker. I could speak forever.
No, I love it. So you mentioned that your parents were entrepreneurs. So after seeing your parents run a small business, why were you like, yeah, I want to do that too? You saw, I mean, it's not like you were a baby. You saw what your parents were doing and the struggles and what they had to do to not only to support a family, but to support the families of their families that work for them. What attracted you to it?
It's not easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say it is. And it wasn't easy for my parents either. There were a lot of, times where they were stressed and struggled and wanted to make sure they can feed us. And they could tell us more stories, but really for me, it was seeing the impact, right? So there's a lot of great that comes out of it. There's a lot of freedom. There's a lot of, pieces where you're actually feeling you're doing something and you're changing people's lives. There's a lot of things that are really good. Maybe I am a sociopath, like you said. And I think there are studies that show that CEOs and sociopaths have a lot of the same traits because you have to, be a little cutthroat sometimes. And this is, I think, the part that a lot of startup founders and small business owners fall into is they think it's going to be kind of easy, especially with social media nowadays and nobody talking about the bad times, right? All these books we read a lot of times from CEOs who've made it make it sound like it's easy. It's not. I think that a lot of it is just finding your community, finding people who support you, making sure your family does. In my family, I tried to get away from it, but it kept bringing me back and I just realized it was a passion. And as long as you're passionate about it, I think that's where you have to be.
That's awesome. I remember I was speaking to an entrepreneur. He was a construction business owner from Atlanta, Georgia. And, he was asked, what are you most proud of? And he was one of the largest construction firms in Atlanta, did some major projects, worked on the dome down there, airport. And he goes, the one thing I'm proud of is I never missed payroll once. And as a regular person who doesn't own a business, you're like, wait, really? And then if you think about it, that's what he's proud of, the fact that he was regularly able to pay his employees every single week. Does that resonate with you? The idea of as something as simple as just being able to pay your employees, but for folks in the entrepreneur space, people are like, yes, I know what you're talking about, but people outside are like, oh, really? So tell me, does that resonate with you?
I mean, absolutely. And I'm not shocked by that answer, being an entrepreneur, right? Because I know for me, that's a pride point, right? Even through COVID, we kept everyone on, even when I wasn't getting a paycheck. And I know that most owners of small businesses feel the same way, right? It sounds like from the outside in that they may not care, or sometimes they're cutthroat or unemotional, but every owner I know, their biggest thing is that they love their people who work for them and they treat them really well and they want everything for them. They may not be able to give it to them all the time, but that really does resonate.
It's funny thinking about how, since we started this conversation talking about how being proactive, having a strategy, this is stuff, again, most people who start a business don't even think about strategy. They think about product first and then everything else kind of happens afterwards. And that's sort of your specialty is building these strategies for companies. And one of the things I find from speaking to entrepreneurs, there's two parts of difficulties of being an entrepreneur. One is starting the business, and then the second piece is growing the business. What kind of strategies have you helped people with when it comes from that in-between step of the start to the growing? What are some of those you can share with us today? Because I feel like that's one of the things that always comes up with entrepreneurs. Like, for many, the easy part was starting the business. If they have capital, pretty much anybody could start a business. It's growing the business after you've started it out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this is where I come in like a really unique way, is that because I was a startup founder who exited a few businesses, I've been there. We bootstrapped most of those. I had an investor once or twice, but we bootstrapped, which means that everything that came to build the business was come from reinvesting or from our own money. And so you understand what it means to not have all the resources, to not have an open checkbook, to not have an open calendar, right? And you have to be really creative on how do you grow. So what I find the next steps really that are great once you've started the business to growing is that investing in some of the things that seem a little bit soft, like strategy, right? You're still going to have to invest afterwards in either resources or following through and executing on the strategy, but having it is going to change so many things. And then from there, looking at your processes, what are things that you're doing every single day that either you don't have to be doing, you can train someone. If you can build a scope of a standard operating procedure, then you can train someone, right, to do it. Maybe they are more cost effective than you are, right? Or maybe you could be spending your time in other places. Is there things that once you have that procedure, you can automate? Procedures help the execution so much. You'll save time, you'll save resources, you'll be able to consistently deliver a product that is quality. And I think for small businesses, they think, well, I'm one person, I'm a solopreneur, or I'm two people or three people. We don't need processes. We're just jumping in and doing it. That will be your number one way to grow. Find processes, find ways to be more efficient, find ways to automate, find ways to hire and delegate. And whether that's marketing, sales, operations, any of those, that's what you're going to need. And then from the marketing perspective specifically, it's really knowing your buyers and having the feedback from them. Because if you don't know what your buyers want or where they are, then how are you going to market them? We can do social media. And if your buyers are not on social media, I don't care how many followers you have or how much engagement you have, like, you're not going to make money. It's just the fact at the end of the day.
Everything you described just then for the non-business person sounds really boring. Like, can you imagine telling someone like business plans, strategy? Like, I just want to like make stuff. I want to just sell stuff. But sometimes it's like the boring stuff is the stuff that really works, right?
Yeah. And Joe, it's funny because a lot of this comes from my time in like startup world. Everyone thinks that startups and small businesses are the same thing, and they are absolutely not. So I do mentoring for the Arizona Commerce Authority, and we do the Arizona Innovation Challenge, which is one of the country's largest innovation accelerator programs for venture ready. And so we literally sit in a room, and as judges and as mentors, we help go through their pitches and their pitch decks to get investment. And a lot of small business owners have never had to do this. And even though they're not going for venture, I think they should, because going through and putting a pitch deck together really illuminates a lot of pieces of your business you never thought of, right? What's your go-to-market strategy? What's your burn chart? And how are you going to be using your money? And how long do you have? What's your runway? What is the messaging? Is the messaging resonating with people? And these are the things that like small business owners skip over because we just jump in and make the product and sell it. And that's it, right? We literally jump in, and we're almost kind of bringing them back to that point and saying, okay, let's actually work through this, because I don't know that you have market fit, and maybe just a small tweak can give you market fit, right? They don't think about those pieces. And so I think if we can meld a little bit of the startup world and the small business world, we can actually make it a little better for everyone.
Sweet, that's cool. And speaking of mentorship, one of the things outside of Clever Cacao Media is Clever You. So can you just tell us a little more about that?
Yeah. So one of the ways that we pivoted was realizing that small businesses, they don't have the budgets. We've talked about this. I think I've said this multiple times on this podcast alone, right? They don't have the budgets, and that's why they end up getting left behind a lot of times. So we said, okay, how do we finally figure this puzzle out, right? What is that piece that we're missing? And so what we did was we went through and he said, okay, every single challenge we have, there's going to be essentially three or four buyers, right? The first buyer is going to be the ones who have no budget, they're just starting, or maybe they're dabbling with the idea and they want to learn a little bit more. The second buyer is going to be what we call our DIYers. They're the ones who have maybe up to like $1,000 budget. They're doing everything themselves, but they're not experts and they need some hand-holding. They need some trusted hand-holding, not just, they're spending hours a day online trying to sift through blog posts and YouTube videos and try to figure out what they're doing. Then you have our do-it-for-me, what we're calling our do-it-for-me people. They're people who still don't have a large budget, but they need a little bit more hand-holding from an actual marketer, and they don't have the time to do it themselves. So they come in as a do-it-for-me. And then you have our highest level, which is fractional. They need the help of a CMO level marketer, because all marketers are not created equal. An executional marketer and a CMO level marketer, two different things. And they need that strategy and that hand holding. And then they can take the strategy and hire an entry level marketer or someone who's, maybe a little bit cheaper for them to afford and let them execute on it, but have the strategy and the CMO level person there to kind of guide. So with all of those pieces, we realized there needed to be a free or really low cost level for small businesses. And that's where Clever You comes in. Clever You for us is a series of YouTube channels with actual experts who look and talk and have been through it and are not going to sugarcoat it for you. It's products that are either free or minimal cost that are high value, not just fluffy ebooks that give you a little bit of information and leave you with more questions than you had before, but actually stepping you through, and things like workbooks, right? So if you want to figure out how to build your own strategy, we have a workbook that can walk you through that piece. Now, at the end of the day, it's like going to the supermarket, buying a steak and cooking it yourself. It's going to be probably pretty good, but you may want to go to the restaurant every once in a while for a special occasion and have a chef cook it for you. And that's where the next levels come up. And here's where you said, you asked me about marketing and how we know it works. This is how we also can build trust with small businesses. Each product builds upon each other. So if you see a little bit of success with the free level, then you can move up to the DIY, and then you'll see a little more success. And now you're making money and you don't feel like it's as big of an investment. Now you can go up to the next level and the next level, and you start learning the processes through there.
Awesome. All right, Nicole, so I want to wrap things up on a positive. You've been an entrepreneur, you've exited companies, you work with entrepreneurs on a daily basis. What are the 3 traits or actions that you see in many of the successful ones?
So my top one, and you've probably heard this in other podcasts with really, really successful entrepreneurs. I know Sarah Blakely is known to have said things like this, and it's really true. Reid Hoffman has talked about this, is that they may not know what they're doing today, but they're confident that they can either figure it out or learn it tomorrow. And that is really one of the things that once I learned that and really truly took that to heart, that everything changed. The stress level changes, a lot of things change. So being confident in the fact that like you're not going to be an expert, you're going to screw up, you're not going to know everything, and that's okay. But really knowing that tomorrow you're going to figure that out and do whatever it takes to figure that out. Number 2 is the ability to identify an opportunity or to identify when it's time to pivot or throw in the hat, right? We as entrepreneurs get really attached and passionate. And so often we forget that maybe things run its course, right? Maybe the way that you made money before is not the way you're going to make it later. And so there's times where you have to pivot and you have to be able to understand when those opportunities are arising, or look at the NFL with Taylor Swift, right? They never expected that to happen, but they jumped on that opportunity and they were able to expand their reach. So knowing when opportunities, being able to see them and putting yourself in a position to pivot to those. And then the third one, which I talk about with my mentees all the time, is that if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to learn how to trust your gut, how to learn what your intuition. As entrepreneurs, there's so many things that, one person did it this way and another person did it this way, and there's no rules. And so now you have to kind of learn to trust your gut. And when I talk to my friends who are entrepreneurs or my clients, so often the things that they regret or the things that they said, like, I did wrong, is because they didn't trust their gut. So the most important thing you can ever do as a small business owner or entrepreneur is to learn how to build that skill, right? We talked about practicing the skill. Build the skill of trusting your gut. And you can do that outside your business, right? So I'm an ultramarathon runner. I like to travel solo. All of these are things that have the same skill sets as running the business and doing hard things, right? And so you practice through other places in your life, and you'll see that all that kind of happens organically, and all that imposter syndrome, all of that doubt, all that confidence comes automatically with trusting your gut.
Her name is Nicole Zeno, CEO and founder of Clever Cow Media and Clever You. Nicole, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was wonderful. And if you guys want to connect, I want to be friends with all of you. I'm on Instagram. You can find us on clevercowmedia.com. Find us on YouTube, all sorts of places. So join our newsletter and you'll hear everything we're doing.
Awesome. Have a great 24, right, Nicole?
You too.
And that'll do it for another Forbes Books Podcast. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. You can always connect with me on X, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Joe Pardavila or TikTok at J Pardavila. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.